Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your never-ending escort quest host, Madelyn.
I'm your fetch stuff host, Emma.
And welcome to the show. It's a side quest this week. My whole Talk This brain schedule, it's good to be getting back onto out of the holidays here, because now I feel like I'm back in podcast schedule.
Yeah. I mean, not that our schedule changes, of course, because we record this on noon on Sundays. But
you're right. Thanks, Emma.
You're welcome.
But Emma, it's your turn. It's your turn to choose our side quest topic. So what are we going to be talking about?
This week we are going to be talking about side quests.
What? A meta-analysis of all of our side quest episodes on Talk This? That's crazy.
No, not that. The actual video game side quests. Wow.
It's hard to believe we haven't done this before.
I also felt like we had to have done it before, but I went back through and we had not, so.
We've done a lot of side quests about the kind of various types of side quests or things in which side quests played a role in what we were discussing, but apparently we've never done one just about side quests. And if you're a longtime listener sitting out there being like, yes, you did, it was episode 137, you just keep that to yourself. Yeah. Why don't you?
Zip it up. Zippity doo.
Your side quest reward is you get that little kernel of lore that even the creators don't know.
Can't believe they retconned their episode topics.
We're probably overdue in 2022 to retcon a few episode topics.
Yes, I think so as well. But we'll get to that.
R.I.P. The Legend of Zelda, that we have never talked about again on the show as a standalone game after the first episode.
No, we did. We talked about Breath of the Wild because we did a special episode where we switched Uncharted and Legend of Zelda. Yeah.
You're right that we did. That was more me making a point about some of the games trapped in the Talk This archives than anything else. True. Anyway, Emma, what inspired you to, other than the great fun of doing a side quest on side quest, what inspired this pick?
That was pretty much it. I thought it was a good way to start side quests off in the new year, is to do a side quest about side quests, if I'm being completely honest. That was the inspiration.
Typical Emma, no backstory to it. She's like, I just came up with a good idea.
We'll see if this is a good idea. So, Malin, what's a side quest anyway?
Oh my goodness, of course you'd put this on me. It's kind of unclear what a side quest... You know what when you see it, sort of. Or maybe you don't. You know it when you finish it.
Mm-hmm.
Is what a side quest is. No, a side quest is something you do in a game that is probably at least sort of optional in some way and is separate from the main quest at least a little bit.
Yeah.
Isn't that a nice wishy-washy definition?
Yeah. I was thinking it's just like a side quest is a quest where completing it will not move you any closer to the ending. Putting aside the idea of levels or money, right? Those are sub things to be concerned about when it comes to moving towards the ending. But by completing the quest, you will not make any progress towards the end. Basically, you'll be in the same spot as where you were before you did it.
And I think that's a little different. I think that's an elegant way of putting it. When I saw it in your notes, I was like, dang, I wish I'd come up with that.
I am pretty smart.
Who would have thought? But it does go up against a little bit of some of the colloquial use of side quests. Not really necessarily within talking about games, but in terms of talking about side quest, as it's sometimes applied to other media or in talking about narrative, that's a little different, I think, than how it's sometimes used.
Elaborate.
Well, you posted this one article that I wrote a little grumpy tirade about in our Google Doc that was like, side quest type things are becoming more popular in television, where the characters just sit around somewhere for an episode and character is developed. And they do something that's unnecessary to the plot to develop character. And first of all, I was like, ugh, anyone who throws around, like, films and TV doing stuff that's unnecessary, like, whatever. You can talk about that with your friends sometimes if you want to, of like, yeah, like, did we really have to have that episode about butterfly migration in the middle of our sci-fi epic, right? That's, I guess,
sure.
Fine.
Yeah.
But sometimes I feel like some of the conversation around that is too much like, like, if it wasn't necessary, then it shouldn't. It's just all comes to this, like, toxic Marvel film viewing style
sure,
of
yeah.
like, everything has to be an Easter egg for something else, and everything has to lead into the main story. And yeah, it was interesting to me to read this article, both because it made me angry that way, but also because I was like, it's interesting that you're talking about this as something that's appearing in television and media now. Like, what is the Odyssey if not one big collection?
That's
of
true.
side quests?
Odysseus goes on a lot of side quests.
Just go home, dude.
Come on, just make it home.
Like, how hard is it? Sail the boat. I know Poseidon's kind of OP, but, like, get over it. Get good.
I have some sympathy for that viewpoint just because I think all TV show episodes could be like 5 to 10 minutes shorter usually. But, yeah, I get your point there.
I think that's a different critique, though. Like, I totally agree a lot of the time, but I think coming at stuff from the perspective of it's unnecessary as opposed to the perspective of there's pacing issues to remedy in things feels like,
which is definitely pacing issues with side quests is definitely something that comes up in video games.
Definitely. But I think when Emma and I talk about side quests on the show today, we're not so much talking about required elements of the game in which you are not directly pursuing the big bad. Like, somebody had a picture of, like, Cloud in his lovely dress in one of the side quest articles I read, and I was like, that's not a side quest.
I do wonder if that's just because the dress he wears changes depending on the side quests that you do.
Oh, I guess I hadn't thought about that. You're right. Okay, that's fair. But my point still being that something like that, wherein you're kind of like not taking a break exactly, where the path of the narrative of the game takes you down a side road, on its way back to the quote-unquote main story. That's not a side quest, I think, under our definition, if it's something that you're still required to do. You're right. Yes. I hadn't thought about, because Josh and I both got the same dress. Doesn't everybody really get the same dress unless they try really hard to get the other dresses in that game?
Well, I know some people just shotgun the main story, and so they get, like, the plainer dress,
for instance. Why would you do that, though?
I don't know.
A conversation for the episode. But all this to say that I think in games especially, because I don't really think applying the term side quest to movies and television is a good use of the term, to be honest. Yeah. But that's fine. But in games, I think there has to be some kind of optional or flexible element to the quest. In order for it to qualify as a side quest, even if it is flimsier in a narrative way, or flimsier in terms of why aren't we fighting so-and-so right now? That's not a side quest for us. It's got to be optional, or sort of optional.
Yeah. Sort of optional is important because side quests can certainly affect the main story. It's just that it does not progress the main story, I think, is the important thing. Like, and it can have effects on it later down the line, but it doesn't, like... I think if you happen on, like, a chain of quests, like, I saw one in this list of, like, the original Persona has, like, a secondary ending that's, like, from a long chain of side quests, for instance. And at that point, I don't think that that's a side quest. I think that that's just an alternate story route, right?
Yeah, something that I found myself thinking about a lot as we researched for this was that it feels like we're missing a vocabulary term for something in the middle, right? That side quest as it stands now in 2022 encompasses such a wide array of possible things, from different levels of involvement to different levels of impact on the story, like the main story, to different levels of just like meatiness of interactivity, that calling something a side quest is almost too broad to tell you, like in the same way as action adventure is too broad to tell you anything about a game that's particularly meaningful. Side quest feels like it feels like there needs to be some kind of equally catchy term for something that's like kind of in the middle, for these things that they're optional, but the developers don't really want you to skip them, kind of like meatier experiences. So I hope you have a suggested name for that, because I don't.
I don't really either. No. I referred to the thing. I was when I was making my definition, I was thinking about Breath of the Wild, because you brought up that's like, it's a game that's like 90% side quests. And I was thinking like, oh, there's the ones that bring you closer to the end, and then I remembered you can just go to the end in Breath of the Wild. So there's literally only one main quest. But then there are main-ish quests that it recommends that you do before you go to the main quest, with the 4 divine beasts in the 4 different areas, because those give you like new abilities or just more health. I don't know exactly.
You know what? Get my boyfriend here on the guest spot, because I'm gonna.
They give you advantages when you go into the final boss, for instance, but those are not necessarily required and do not move you any closer to the ending, because you can just go to the ending. You're always as close to the ending as you can be.
Yeah, it becomes a kind of a challenging definition game in games like Breath of the Wild, which are of course becoming more, everybody's making their Sonic Breath of the Wild, Pokemon Breath of the Wild, whatever, Breath of the Wild. But as games overall begin to prioritize this open exploration as a way of experiencing the game that is pivotal to the game experience, and in many ways kind of both meant to be its own reward, but more importantly separate from the ways that, of course, traditional quote-unquote Zelda games have an exploration element to them as well, right? But it's very much like you go to the next dungeon, so you're in the next area, in the next biome, whatever. And so as games move more toward this, well, no, you can do the main quest whenever you want, but most of the game is the like running around of it all. It feels wrong to refer to the 90% of the gameplay of Breath of the Wild as side quests, because of course the main story is almost the side quest in that game.
Sure, yeah. I don't know if that necessarily eliminates the side quest term. It just feels like there needs to be a genre that is not Breath of the Wild-ites or something like that.
Breathy games.
Breathy games. Botwas. Anyway. It is my secret sadness and wish that Final Fantasy 15 had been in development hell for like 2 or 3 more years and just had pivoted to being like a Breath of the Wild copy.
If only.
That's what I wish deep in my heart.
A lot of the comment sections on articles, around the time where everyone was angry about Final Fantasy 15 were very angry about the side quests in Final Fantasy 15. So that's an interesting take from you, given that the gamer commentariat of the world.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of like the formalized side quests, I guess, are kind of uninspiring. You do like go like catch frogs, for instance.
Yeah,
although there is an element of humor in that Noctis just has to pick up some frogs, and I do find that amusing in and of itself. That's my reward. But it also has a lot where like you camp at a place and there's like a random event with one of your friends and that turns into a side quest. Or the one where you unlock chocobos and have to like track and hunt like this really big, huge monster that's terrorizing the area is a really good set piece. And that's fun in and of itself. And also, I just enjoyed the combat, which I feel like was an unpopular opinion at the time. So that was helpful, I guess.
Well, I guess that makes a lot of sense. And it makes sense, you as a person who I think, I'm doing this based on 5 years of experience of you talking about this game, right? But like so much of what you enjoyed about the game was the character dynamics, that having side quests that rewarded you with more of those character dynamics was something that was valuable for you and may not have been as valuable for people who came for spiky boy, swing big sword.
Pretty small sword in Final Fantasy 15. I can see why some people were disappointed. It's a small sword. Normal size sword.
Sword.
Not long,
small.
Not wide.
6
sword.
out of 10.
I also appreciated the Cup Noodles, which, again, I also felt like was an unpopular opinion. Which also, I get, but I found it very funny.
So, I feel like we're starting to get at the idea that, like, side quests can be different things for different people, of course. But, Emma, what makes a good side quest?
Well, I read a few different things talking about, like, what a good side quest is, or at least, like, general guidelines for what makes a good side quest. So one of them was talking a little bit about, like, a side quest has to be sort of relevant to the main plot, or something about the story, but not, like, so interesting and vital that it somehow upstages the main plot. This one's from gamedeveloper.com. It also mentioned that like side quests should be like quick, and it talked about like 15 minutes, and like that is very much not what a side quest is anymore.
No.
I guess maybe you could think about like the actual act of side questing could be 15 minutes and like not count like travel in between, or if you do anything else in between finishing it. But even then, I feel like most side quests are longer than that.
Like, I guess it's a good golden rule if you're trying to just really do something boring. I mean, I don't know. Like, that's, I understand the, like, okay, yeah, if it's really just going to be, like, a fetch quest in town, and you're not going to build anything more to it around that, it's just kind of like a hidden grinding mechanic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it shouldn't be long. But I totally agreed. That's not really what people are doing in this space anymore, or not what people are doing in this space and getting praise for.
Yeah. And then the last tip on this one was to use core gameplay mechanics, or be careful with special case functionality for that particular side quest. Which there are definitely subcategories of side quests that are not that. Like, you look at Yakuza, and it's all, like, minigame side quests, for instance, that use functionality way outside the main story scope.
We made it almost 20 minutes without mentioning Yakuza here, and it was you, so
proud of myself. That's the goal. I also watched Design Doc's video on side quests, and he talked a little bit about, and this is what I originally was thinking, like, one of the purposes of side quests in like JRPGs especially is it's to make the grinding like a little hidden, like you were saying. Like, rather than being like, oh, I'm not at the level that the game wants me to be for this next main story boss, I guess I'll go to like a monster field and just run around for a while. Instead, you would pick up side quests and they would give you experience and resources and money. That's just sort of disguised doing that same thing where you're like running around grabbing things or killing monsters, but with some sort of context around it. So it makes the grind like more purposeful.
It was interesting the way you talked about that, because of course it made me think of Pokemon a little bit, and I was like, man, that game really does just kind of be like, nah, you gotta go grind, buddy. And I guess the side quest is catch 'em all. But
yeah, that's true.
But that when you said Monster Field, I was like, oh, like what game have I even played where you just kind of like go back and grind that's even vaguely modern? And Pokemon does come to mind.
Did Sword and Shield not have any like side quests or anything?
Oh boy, it's been so long since I played the like actual main part of Sword and Shield that I have to think. But I don't remember there being anything like super substantial. I mean, exploring the wild area was kind of its own reward in some ways, right?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, I know I didn't finish those. I got stuck on Raihan and then didn't go back to it. That shows you how much I like grinding. No. I'll put your game down if you tempt me. The video also talks about like encouraging other mechanics that are also part of the main story. So like exploring would be one thing. If you have to explore to find the main story anyway, then it can be interesting to have side quests sort of hidden to reward your exploration in other ways, for instance. Or if you have like an elaborate world, but like it doesn't, the main story doesn't encourage you necessarily to go off the beaten path, then knowing that there are things off the beaten path could encourage you to explore. He also talked about building them into the main story. This is something I'm actually like unsure about. I find it weird in Yakuza and other Ryuga Gotoku games when they have like subcases within the main story. Like I sort of get it. You said in terms of introducing like big side quests like real estate management or cabaret club, and I sort of get it as like the first one too, to introduce the idea that there are sub stories around. But like in Yakuza 7 and both Judgments, there are various times where they're just like, here's a subcase. And it's not that I mind doing that in terms of like stepping away from the main story for an instance, but it's weird that it presents it like that to me, I guess. Does that make sense?
Well, especially in a series that is so rich with opportunities to step away from the main story, you know. That game is begging you to step away from the main story at all times.
Yeah.
Right? And not because, like, the main story is quite interesting. Sometimes I do feel kind of torn when I'm playing this of, I want to know what happens to the story, but also the cabaret ain't gonna run itself. So I feel that. But I totally agree that, while it makes sense, and something I appreciated in like some of the articles I was reading, and I think he talked about this in the video as well, is, you know, you want to make a side quest convenient to the player.
Yeah.
Right? It's a bummer to make some fun content that's totally hidden and the player never sees. Now, you can do some of that with side quests in a way that you can't with main story, because it's okay if the player doesn't see it. Yeah. But it is a bummer to have something as rich as some of those kind of management sim elements of Yakuza and not see them at all. I didn't play Pocket Circuit at all in Yakuza 0 because I don't think it didn't make you. And I was like, that sounds dumb. And then when I went and did it in Kiwami, I was like, oh man, like this would have been this sub-story in Kiwami would have been much richer if I'd played with these children back in the 80s. Anyway, but I totally agree that in a series that is already so rich with side content, it does sometimes sort of feel frustrating when they're like in Kiwami, there's an arc where it's like, okay, now you're gonna do this like little sub-story where you help the florist's son and his Yakuza daughter girlfriend kind of get back together. And I can't remember if that actually pops up as a sub-story or not. If it doesn't, you know, whatever. I'm like willing to write it off a little bit as like, okay, you can take a winding road. But I do remember that feeling like a sub-story to me, even if it wasn't formally one. And it was just like, you don't need this. Maybe you need this for pacing if I'm playing through the game straight through the main story, but like, who does that in this game?
One thing, like, comparing, like, Judgment to Lost Judgment, and with the caveat that's been a while since I played the first game, and maybe it didn't quite work with this, but this is how I remember, is there'd be certain times in the main story where you're like, you have to wait a little bit, right? Like, plot-wise, for someone to do something or something to happen. And so they'd send you out, and sometimes they would give you an actual subcase to do as part of, like, the main story to fill that space while you're waiting for someone to do something. Or it would give you, like, a certain amount of time to do things. before, like, someone called you and said things are ready.
I think they had that in Yakuza 0 too. Like,
and
Kiryu just like sits around in Osaka for a while.
In comparison to Lost Judgment, where occasionally there'll be times where, like, oh, you have to wait a little bit, but the way it's programmed, you just have to get a certain distance away from where you were previously, and then they will call you automatically, and then you can just go immediately back and do it, and like continue with the main story, which feels like such an odd design choice. When it's like, why don't you just cut to black, or, you know, do what you used to do and make me do like a side quest or something? Because it feels so purposeless to get on my skateboard, skate for about 5 seconds, and then get a call that's like, okay, you can do the main story again now. It just feels a little odd.
Well, I think it comes down to the pacing struggle of the more robust side quest environment of contemporary games, right? Certainly, of course, there are older games that have great examples of side quest. Everybody wants to talk about Majora's Mask when we're in these articles, right? And for good reason. Mm-hmm. But certainly in the past 10-ish years, side quests have like undergone this like continuing renaissance, and also everybody wants to talk about The Witcher, right? But basically It's like, you know, they've stepped forward in terms of being much more narratively compelling than just hidden grind fests, right? And side quests certainly serve a purpose as hidden grinding, right? They're a good, like, that's a good way to use them, but they've now hit the point where they can really be the meal of the game a lot of the time. Even if the main game is still good, you see a lot more people on Twitter talking about Yakuza's fun side quests than you do them talking about the meat and potatoes of the story. Right?
Yes, that's very true.
And like, in many ways, like The Witcher gets dominated by side quest discourse, and Breath of the Wild, certainly people want to talk more about the game than the final boss.
Yes.
But it creates this problem, and I definitely experienced this a lot with Yakuza and sometimes with other games as well. It creates this problem of pacing because, you know, I found that game developer kind of 4 tips for side quests. I was like, all of this is well and good for creating a side quest that doesn't detract from the game. Right? It's like, it's tied to the main story some, but not too much. It's good, but it's not too good. It's pretty short. It doesn't deviate too much from main stories. But when I think of side quests that actually stand out, it's ones that give you a totally different mechanic or change your existing mechanics in a significant way. Or it's ones that are almost narratively more interesting than the main story, right? I've been playing Skyrim. I did get the area to load, so I've been able to progress in Skyrim the past week. Hooray.
Good.
Loaded in half a second when I loaded it. Did not make any sense. Anyway, and in Skyrim it's like, oh man, like I've totally lost track of what's happening in the main story, because who cares? It's probably fine, but like that's I think what makes this game a game that people are still playing the way they are 10 years later. Is that there's so many side quests that are quite rich, or even if they're not rich, they're still fun to play. And so, like, I think that some of those ideas in that game developer page, well-intentioned and good, don't make for the kinds of side quests that people really value now. Mm-hmm. However, the kinds of side quests people really value now make it impossible for you to pace your game.
Yeah.
I don't know how you fix that.
I mean, one way to do it, again, this is my dream version of Final Fantasy 15, is just to lower the stakes a certain amount. And you have this in, like, Breath of the Wild, where it's like, oh, you know, like, it's not, you know, it's imminent. Like, you know, the final boss is coming back, but it's not, like, imminent, right? Like, Zelda's been dealing with it for, like, 100 years. She can deal with it for, like, 1 more year while you get ready, you know?
Yeah.
Or, like, creating just a situation where you're on a road trip with your bros and like just remove all the stakes from Final Fantasy 15 and just make it a road trip with your bros game. That sort of fixes it. So just having, because the issue with pacing a lot is near the end, the story is like ramping up and like things are happening and dudes are doing stuff, and you're racing in a car or hunting frogs or doing all the optional bosses before the final boss so that the final boss is totally trivial. That's what I did in Tales of Arise. It was very funny. And that's what sort of kills the pacing a little bit, I think. Because the main story is trying to create these like stakes that are escalating like you would with a story, right? But because there's all these little things you can do to take breaks from it, you can't necessarily, it doesn't work necessarily to follow that same rising stakes thing. And I think this is, for big games especially, this is as exacerbated because you might have different teams working on the main story and the side quests that might not communicate as much as you need to, right? And so you get different feelings from those two experiences due to different people like on the ground writing it.
It's really tricky, right?
I mean, I think it's interesting. Like, as much as Breath of the Wild is not really for me as a gamer, because I need, my structure or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think it's an interesting point to really think about as like of someone who's writing a narrative for games, because for so long our like big budget games have been very leaning on movies and TV show styles of storytelling because that's something that works, but that's not all games can do. And so maybe using that movie or TV show type writing isn't where like we should evolve from that a little bit, maybe for some games,
Well, it's the interesting point that you make that, in trying to have it all, you dilute some of it, mm-hmm. right? That even if you have this like amazing movie of a main story and you have all of these amazing, shorter experiences of side quests, having all of that together feels like watching 7 TV shows at the same time, and something gets lost there. And that's like, and thinking about that, it's like, well, people are going to continue to make games that way. It's not like it ruins your experience or anything. No. Well, or it doesn't have to totally ruin your experience or anything. But it does definitely come also, I think, from people being too genre savvy or too knowing of how they play, if that makes mm-hmm. sense. When the final boss is coming, and that's good. That's a good thing that games do. It's a good thing that they often telegraph to you, or literally, or just in terms of like, the music's more intense now. Like, yeah. Hey, the final battle is coming. Maybe don't walk into it by accident, right? There's other things you wanted to do them. However, still feels weird for my boys in Yakuza 4 to all just be like hanging out at New Serena, being like, hey, we're gonna go storm the Millennium Tower, maybe to our deaths in a couple hours. But if you need to hit the Konbini or anything, it's probably the moment.
Yeah.
Like, in some ways I appreciated that because it was so transparent that like it knew, but it still messed up the vibe. And so, but that was partially because I know, and you said this about yourself as well, I know that once the game is over, I am not going to continue to play the game.
Yes.
I'm very much not a post-game player for games. Yakuza is probably the thing that tempts me most to do that, but because I know that I don't do that, and because frankly when I finish those games I'm usually like, okay, the next one, because the main story hooks me in again. I just know that I'm not the completionist person who goes back and does the side quests at the end of the game, and it's nice that they make that possible for people. And good for people who want that, but that's not me, and so I destroy games at the end by being like, the final battle is coming. Let me make sure I maxed out my baseball skills or whatever.
Yeah. I do appreciate, like, subtle ways that the game might tell you to, like, okay, it's time to get going now. Like, I remember in Yakuza 7, there's a few times where technically you can go around and, like, shop and do side quests if you want to, but there is, like, this really intense music in the background that's, like, replaced the normal like chill music, and so it's like, you can do this, but we will be playing this, like, song in the background the whole time.
The intense music though. I'm like, dope, like, let's do it. Haruka, let's go around town. The tunes are hot.
Okay, so maybe it doesn't work for everyone.
No, it does still work. I still go like, okay, like maybe, but it's not perfect.
Yeah, that's fair.
What about players who play games and there's like important side quests for like understanding the tone and feel of the world of the game, but they don't play any of them?
I think that's another challenge in terms of, like, and I think that's part of why one of the guidelines in that game developer one thing is, like, it should be interesting but shouldn't upstage the main story, is, like, part of it is that, yeah, some players are just going to play the main story. They're not going to engage with your side quests. And so you have to make sure that that main story is a satisfying experience on its own, and any flavor that the side quests bring is flavor or deeper understanding, I guess, or nuance or something to that effect. But they're not, like, necessary to get the intended experience. If your side quests are necessary to get the intended experience, they should not be side quests, I think, is generally my thought on that.
It's tricky. I think... So what I was trying to joke about was Clickbait Boyfriend not playing any of the side quests in Nier Automata.
Yes. Yeah.
And just not even realizing they were there.
I think it's funnier than him not playing any. I think it's just funny that he never was like, what is this red dot on the map? Maybe I should go look at it.
He maintains to this day that was not enough of a marker. I asked him about it before the show, and he was like, no. Like, that's on them.
Okay.
But I think what that gets at is, so, you know, he finished the first playthrough of Nier Automata.
He did finish the first playthrough, yeah.
He did. You're right, he did. Because then I was like, like the side quests. He was like, what? But I think that, like, what is interesting about that case study of my life is that I totally agree that really no individual side quest in that game is, like, so essential to getting the feel of the game or getting hooked enough to continue back for the subsequent playthroughs. But obviously the experience there was that he needed to have played some of them.
I don't know. I think you just need to have finished the game and you get the intended tone. He did not finish the game. He just got the A route with weird, so...
Okay, that's valid, but I think that a lot of the reason that he was not interested in continuing on was that he hadn't engaged with a lot of the flavor of the story in that first part.
But that doesn't really have to do with getting the tone. That's about, like, hooking your player, I guess.
Fair
and
enough.
Clearly it did not hook him. So... Because I think even if you did none of the side quests, as long as you played through Nier Automata from beginning to end, you would get it.
Right.
The side quests add stuff to it, yeah, but I think the intended experience is there, as long as you play through the whole game. Which, there's nothing wrong with stopping before that if a game's not for you. I'm not saying that to, like, roast Clickbait Boyfriend or anything. The game, it's not for him. So he put it down. That makes sense, right?
I can feel him feeling roasted when he listens to this.
I would like to say that there's nothing wrong with stopping a game that you're not really enjoying, or if you want to do something else. Don't feel like you do not have to finish everything that you start. Just putting that out there. I think that's really important to put out there into the world, because some people feel like they have to finish things that they hate, and I think that it makes the world a worse place. But yeah, so that's my argument, is that I don't think you have to do the side quests to get the intended experience of that game.
Okay, so then, not counterpoint, but related point, though.
You do in Nier Replicant, just to experience the one time they're like, F you, here's some money, you loser, every time you finish a side quest. So, I think that is part of the intended experience.
So I think my point is, so much of what is exciting that happens in side quests, and so much that in reading some interviews with developers about side quests that seems exciting about developing them, is that it's an opportunity to do things that you can't do in the main game. Whether that's difficulty, whether that's playing with mechanics, whether that's like tone and story tone things that your main game won't support, right? There's a lot of opportunity for variety. But that also means that there's a lot of opportunity for things to not be for everyone, right? And so what's nice about that is, well, it's a side quest. You don't have to play it. So if it's not for you, you don't have to play it. However, not to make this whole thing a Yakuza case study, right? But like that, or Breath of the Wild, right? If you just play the main game for those games, I don't want to say that you've done something wrong exactly, because you haven't, but there is something that feels fundamental about those games that you have not engaged with, that, again, not that you're playing it wrong, because you can't play the game wrong. You probably can play some games wrong, but you mostly can't play a game wrong if you're playing it. But you know, while there's something important about all of that stuff collectively all being optional, because I don't want to have to play Mahjong because I don't know how to play it. There's something that if you don't engage with any of it, it still feels like it's okay that you've missed something key. Does that make any sense, what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's an argument for why you would introduce sub-stories or side quests in your main quest, right? Like, that's why, as much as I'm like, meh, about it when they have like the side quest icon pop up in the middle of a main story, I guess that's why, is because they want you to make sure that the player knows that that's there and that it's fun. You know, they make you do like the one cabaret thing in the main story, right?
Yeah.
So, like, they're making sure you know it's there and that it's fun. Versus just, like, going into a random building and discovering that it's there and that it's fun.
So, totally agreed. I guess I just think, for me, it's the, like, optional portion of it that I sometimes struggle with how to define that for a side quest. It's like, 'cause sometimes it's optional, but it's, like, not really all optional to really, like, and I don't know. That doesn't, now I'm just talking nonsense.
Yes.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Do you have any side quest pet peeves? I'll take a hard right turn to get away from my nonsense.
I mean, fetch quests are annoying. Like, of all types.
Why do we hate them?
Though they're just silly. Like, you have to, it's just grind. It's the weakest possible framing for grinding. Like, it's just saying go grind. Basically. There's also something annoying, like, even if it's like a fetch quest where you have to like talk to multiple people, which is something that I consider a fetch quest, right? Like, more traditionally, like, you go fight things and collect the amount of things that you need and then bring them back. But there's a variant where you'd like go talk to various people and get things you need and bring them back. There's just something, like, when I've already explored this city, you know, unless a city is, like, really big or it's taking me places I haven't been before or something like that. If it's just, like, this is the area and now you're gonna run around this area for, like, the 5th time and, like, talk to random people to grab things. Like, the narrative around that has to be really strong, or else you're just making me run from one end of a map to another for no real reason, right?
Yeah, I think you make a good point there about going back someplace you've already been. Like, I was thinking, like, Skyrim is basically almost all fetch quests. And there are some quests that are not that and that are more memorable because of it, but there's a lot of kind of like go to Sheep's Head Den and retrieve the gold amulet, right? Kind of things. And that doesn't bother me so much, partially because sometimes I play Skyrim just to achieve something simple, right? And there is a value to those kind of simple side quests in terms of giving players that, like, I accomplished something this play session kind of feel, at least for me, I guess. But almost always I do end up going somewhere new on the map or finding something new. And so that softens the blow of, this is like a boring quest. Also in that game, I guess I can very much choose when I want something that I'm just going to be able to complete quickly and easily and isn't that complicated, and when I want to engage with one of the more robust quests. So that variety does help too.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, I think the escort quest is more infamous than the fetch quest, to be honest. The fetch quest is so ubiquitous. You get it and you're like, fetch quest. But then when you get an escort quest, you're like, an escort quest.
Isn't that just a matter of technology not really being able to do it, though?
Yeah.
The fetch quest has, like, reached its peak, you know? Like, it is what it is. It's not really any limitations of what games can be that are limiting the fetch quest, right? It's just that it's pretty simple, and that's all it is. The escort quest sucks because the character wants to be dead 9 times out of 10.
That's fair.
Like, I'm not saying it would be great either way, but I am saying so much of the frustration of those is that the AI is just not at the point that it makes even vaguely intelligent decisions.
Yeah. Except at the same time, there's a part of me that's like, wouldn't it be fun if the AI, like, really was, like, wandered off constantly and was, like, trying to fall off cliffs because they're, like, distracted or looking for something or something like that. It's a part of me that's like, what if we made escort quests worse? Would that make them better?
I actually think it would, because I think what's awful about them is it's just like, it just randomly, like, if it was something that actually felt an intended part of the game, I think it would feel like potentially, frustrating probably, but feel like potentially an interesting challenge. Whereas usually what it feels like, and this is why I never bring any companions with me anywhere in Skyrim. Why would you do it? They're gonna run into your axe. Whenever I have someone with me on a quest, I have to, like, let them do as much of the fighting as possible because they love to run into my sword, decide I'm an enemy, and then I have to reload.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, if I had someone who was trying to get hit by me, at least it would feel like a game. Right now, it just feels like, this sucks.
Oh man, I was gonna say something, but I don't remember what it is now.
We'll go on it. We'll do a different quest. It'll come back.
Mm-hmm.
Come back around to it. What about the guilt of side quests? They talked about this
quickly, actually. The one way you can fix escort quests is please make the NPC's walking speed like your walking speed.
What? You don't want them to walk, like, slow as a glacier?
I feel like every time there's an escort quest, they, like, walk faster than your walk, but walk slower than your run. So you just have to, like... Yeah.
I'm like doing the physical motion here, but that's no good for a podcast. Like, right. Awkward, halting, walk, run.
Yes.
Have you seen, I can't remember which Kingdom Hearts game it is that you have to escort Minnie Mouse at some point?
Yeah, 2. Kingdom Hearts 2.
Have you seen how they handle that in, like, speedruns?
Do they just leave her behind?
No, they kind of, like, run behind her and push her along in this very, like, kind of, like, half glitched way.
That's funny.
It's like, good. We should all be able to do that.
Really, he should just pick her up and, like, run.
I know. Well, it's a weak boy. Minnie's dense.
He punched Davy Jones in the face. I think he can carry Minnie under his arm.
Fair enough.
Alright. Side quest guilt. Go on.
Do you feel it? Is it even possible to say no to a side quest when someone offers it to you?
I mean, I don't say no to side quests, but not, like, out of guilt, you know? I would say no to it if it was, like, you have to do this right now, you know, and I'm not ready for it, which, like, sometimes there are side quests like that. But, like, if it's just, like, a do something side quest, like, yeah, I'll just say yes, because what if I do it, you know? I would like to get the reward for it if I do it.
Yeah, I would be interested. I don't know that I would enjoy this, but I would be interested to see more games experiment with things expire, or you only get one chance to say yes to something. Mm-hmm. I don't think that this is something that I would enjoy, to be clear. I think I would be frustrated by this and not like it, but I think that there's interesting things to play around with there that maybe I would appreciate from a design standpoint, even if I, as a player, maybe wouldn't like it.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, do you have other grand thoughts about side quests? Should I ask about favorite side quests?
I don't know if I really have favorite side quests, to be honest, which does tell you a lot, I guess. The school stories in Lost Judgment are great. That's just like a separate game, though, is the thing. Like, the school stories are just like, here's an extra game attached to your game. This one's good.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. I couldn't resist the dig. I can never resist the dig at Lost Judgment. As I've said, the Cup Noodle quest in Final Fantasy 15, where you have to gather the ingredients to make, like, homemade cup noodles, and then they come to the conclusion that the packaged cup noodles are better after all, is so delightful to me. I don't know. I remember doing that and being like, this is peak side quest design. Cup noodles. Yeah. I collect the Winnie the Pooh pages in Kingdom Hearts. Probably the only, like, real
side quest. But I guess
you hadn't thought of that as a side quest?
I hadn't. Because I do it every time. So it's like, to me, it's like, this is not optional.
Yes, that's fair. But I do think Winnie the Pooh is probably the closest thing to, like, a traditional side quest that Kingdom Hearts has that isn't, like, post-game bosses.
Do you think the Colosseum counts? I was kind of, like, I don't really understand. Colosseums are just a weird,
those feel like their own genre of thing.
Yeah. Because, like, on one hand, it's sort of a side quest. On the other hand, like, is it a mini game? On the other hand, what is it?
Yeah.
That brings me to another question, which is, like, where do collectibles fit into this?
It's interesting. It depends on how it's framed, I think. Right. Like, there are some games where you just collect them for the sake of completion, right?
Right.
You just find things and you add them to your collection. And then there's some games where it is actually framed as a quest. Like, a lot of the Tales games will have you collecting something over the course of the game for a side quest. So, like, Tales of Berseria, you're, like, collecting cats. That's Katz, in case you were wondering.
Sure.
And in Arise, you're collecting owls. That's spelled just owls, just the normal owls. In case you were wondering. Of course. Both of those are tied to, like, unlocking, like, optional cosmetics, but they're also, like, side quests that you can complete and get rewarded for by collecting, like, all of them or a certain amount of them. So I think that collectibles are, like, based on whether the game frames them as a side quest or not is how you determine whether they're side quests or not. Does that make sense? Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I guess it's just, this came up for me when I was thinking about, again, a lot of these articles about designing side quests or critiquing side quests are about whether the amount of work that you put in is adequately rewarded. And how do you do that without either breaking the game or making the side quest not really optional anymore? And I think that that's challenging to begin with and becomes even more challenging when you exist in the platinum trophy world of gaming today.
Well, in that, the reward is kind of just the platinum trophy, I guess, you know?
Right, but if I were to make up like 100 collectibles thing in my game and the only reward was after doing everything else, I also get a platinum trophy. You know what I mean? It's just, you're just balancing people who are playing for very different reasons, and people who want intrinsic to the game rewards, and people who want extrinsic, they got the trophy rewards.
Yeah.
Well, whatever.
I mean, one of the things in design docs was like, what are you offering as a reward for these side quests? And some of them it's just like, well, you get some experience and you get some money and maybe you get some sort of like satisfying resolution to this side quest plotline, and that's the reward in itself. But for like big quests, like he was talking about how like if you give like a really rare weapon, but it's like the last quest.
Yeah.
You can't do that because what are you using that weapon on? Nothing. Versus like, you know, in Kingdom Hearts 2, if you do everything in the end, you get like a bronze, a silver, and then a gold crown that's just on Sora's head. Which is really just a bragging cosmetic, right? But it does like make you like, yeah, I'm the king of the Kingdom Hearts. You know?
It is my kingdom.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, I think cosmetics are often a good thing because, you know, if you're someone who's that obsessed with the game, that's the thing too, is thinking about who's doing what side quests.
Yeah.
And if you're the kind of person who's like really collecting all of the things, you must care enough about the game, hopefully anyway, unless you're just one of those horrible kind of like platinum trophy hunters, in which case...
I mean, hopefully you're platinum trophy hunter for games you like, you know? Hopefully.
Right. But you know, like there is
Although by the time you get a platinum trophy, do you hate the game now? Is the
Probably.
Question. Yes.
That's the real reward. But it's challenging. It's definitely challenging because, you know, like you said, something I don't think about how it ruins pacing is that you get over leveled, because I have baby gamer hands and I'm bad at games, so I rarely get over leveled. But you know, the trick to giving the fancy big weapon at the end might be that it's great for New Game Plus, which sucks for me because I'm not going to do New Game Plus. But you also don't want to give it so early that it makes the boss trivial.
Yes.
So it's a weird balance. Side quests, all about a weird balance.
Yes, exactly.
My favorite side quests are ones that are that continue, that are more than one-offs.
That's fair, yeah.
Like, I think that there are a lot of, like, really funny standalone side quests in the Yakuza series. I think the things that I like best are, like, the characters that you get to see, you know, across games over and over again. Even if the individual side quest isn't necessarily anything that special, it's cool to be like, there's the guys from Club Stardust again. It's been a while. How are they doing?
The pointing meme.
Yeah, exactly. The pointing meme.
Yes.
So, and that's not just true, it's true within games as well. I like things that have the kind of like multi-stage mini plot to them. Yeah. I liked, speaking of collectibles, like I liked collecting all of the lost kids in Chicory, but also supporting the romance between the two caretakers there over time. Right, like I like things that feel like they kind of like continue on alongside your story, the main story. That's, I think, one of my favorite things in side quests. Also, when you get to dress up in funny costumes.
True.
So, make me that game.
All right.
So, what's the future of side quests, Emma? Last question.
There will be more of them.
You think?
Yeah. I mean, we're very much in the age of open world games, and I feel like a lot of open world games are like, we need side quests. And, you know, some of them are good. So hopefully we get to the point where open world games are like, okay, we need good side quests. You know? And that should be the goal. That's my hope for the future.
Good side quests. A low bar. More cup noodle placement.
Exactly. I just want cup noodles.
Well, folks, do you have a favorite side quest that you've played, or just things that draw you to certain types of side quests? Have you ever been a person that has played a game and been like, nah, I'm not going to do any of the side quests, I'm just going to do the main story in this game? Or are you like me sometimes, that you get totally lost in the side quests and you forget what's even happening in the main story? Is there a best side quest reward you've ever gotten? Do you think we're totally wrong and all side quests should be fetch quests and no narrative should be involved? Any of this, any opinions that you have, you can share them with us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can learn all about the show, check out the games that are in the hat for our main episodes. Isn't it funny that our side quests, though, are like almost more required listening than the main episodes?
True.
Unsurprising that we're over here like, they've got to be rich and narratively satisfying.
True.
Was this episode rich and narratively satisfying? You can probably tell us that in the comment form on the website too. But also check out the blog featuring long-running series Clickweight Boyfriend. Be sure to go in the comments there and just be like, you played and you're wrong, dummy, on all of them. And also Split Screen, which is really the Talk This equivalent of a side quest, where we watch Crash Landing on You and My Hero Academia. I saw a Netflix preview for Crash Landing on You when I was on Netflix the other day that seemed to be something I hadn't seen before, but was also just a terrible preview. Just her and the boys eating some fish by a river. Not even the officer.
What do you mean? That's the appeal. Her and the boys.
It wasn't even like, nobody said a word, I don't think. It wasn't even like, we're in North Korea having fish by the river. It was just like, them eating some fish.
That's the appeal.
Like, yes, but also no. Anyway, most importantly, you should subscribe to the show. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, anywhere that you can find podcasts, you can find Talk This. Next week on the show, I think it's Guardians of the Galaxy, right?
Yeah.
And there's an old game.
Rhythm Heaven.
I still haven't looked into whether I'm going to be able to play either of those.
You should probably look into Rhythm Heaven.
I think technically I have played some Rhythm Heaven at some point in my life. Well, that's a pretty weak start to 2021 to be like, oh, I've technically played this game when I was 15. So we're going to see what we can do.
Sounds good.
So tune in for that. 2 weeks from now, a week after that, it'll be time for what we've been playing the past 6 weeks. I'm gonna try to finish some stuff.
Woohoo!
I'm gonna see what I can do. So look forward to that closer to the end of January.
Do you want to sign us off, Madelyn?
You betcha. Listeners, I hope this week you find the right balance of side quests and the main story in your life, and that you get some good rewards that don't throw you too much out of balance.